Welcome to the King Culture Podcast, where we are equipping men to become selfless leaders.
I'm sitting here today with my friend Chance, and we're going to talk about inherent dignity. Glad to have you with me.
Thank you for having me.
One of the big challenges that we face as men is where we find our sense of value. And so many of us, I think, I don't know about you, for me personally, growing up, I always found my value based on how I compared to the guy next to me. And I never felt like I was tall enough, I wasn't athletic enough, I wasn't successful enough. And it really impacted how I felt about myself. And I definitely was not a person that had this inherent sense of dignity. When I think about it, it's very prideful. If you think about your life, what are the things that you maybe in the past looked to give you your sense of value as a man?
Yeah, so similar to you, I always felt like I compared myself, or my value was attached to, what I could provide or what I could do, whether that be athletically or socially, or just, how people perceive me versus internalizing that for myself. So when it comes to how do I attribute dignity and value today, I would say it's, more so about how I feel at the end of the day in terms of just my character and my output. And not necessarily my output from a performance standpoint, but just, am I doing the right thing? That moral compass, that foundation.
I found like when you live that way, you always have this sense of insecurity. You never know, are you good enough?
Yeah.
Have you done enough? Have you worked hard? And you feel pushed, you feel driven.
Absolutely.
Like I gotta achieve more.
As a man, or as a human rather, like we all know that life has its time or its course, right? But it's hard to really recognize that you're on a journey, It's hard to really understand, where you are in that journey as well. Because like when you're going through what we can deem as a failure or a tough time, all you can think about is where you are. It's hard to think about like, where you've been or, the future, because you're just dealing with what you have right now. So like I had to go through, the ups and the downs to really get a sense of peace and foundation where I say, hey, like I had to fail, and I think that's the hardest part. Like as a man is, trying to seek understanding through failure, because that's like the hardest thing, especially for people who attach their dignity to performance and pride and success.
In my own experience, it took me facing failure. It took me making the worst mistakes in my life and things that I thought I would never do, areas that I thought I would never fail in, and experiencing that. But after that experience, I realized that, life went on. My life wasn't over because I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And I realized that I still had value, I still had purpose, my life still had meaning.
Yeah.
Even though, and it destroyed my facade, right?
Yeah.
I felt I had never made these mistakes before, and I felt that I was, I really felt a little self-righteous.
Yeah.
I felt like I was good because I didn't make the same mistakes that other people made.
You thought you knew.
Yeah. And then like once I hit rock bottom, I realized that I was no different than anyone else. I wasn't superior or better than anyone else. And that knowledge helped me to understand that my value was not attached to how good I was or how bad I was. It's just something that was more inherent in me.
I think that's the biggest thing is like, you might be going through a tough time, but just know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And then curating that dignity within yourself, it only comes through experience.
Yeah. I think I found dignity when everything else that I had around me fell apart. When I didn't have anything else to hold on to give me value. And I think that a man really finds his value when he loses everything that he feels can be added or subtracted from him, when there's nothing left but just him.
Yeah.
And you realize when everything else is gone and it's just you, that you're enough.
Yeah.
That you have enough value. I would say, man, this is not something you learn one time and I got it and you move on. It's like a everyday process. Every day I'm tempted to compare myself to somebody else. I'm tempted to get my value from my performance, from how I compare or how successful I am compared to somebody next to me. And every day, every morning, I have to remind myself that my value is unconditional. It's not based off of any of those things. And it's a daily practice, a daily grind. We're always tempted to look around us and say, how do I compare? We got that measuring stick, whether or not we have value enough.
Man, I have a follow-up question for you. So you talk about the daily grind of, your dignity and testing your dignity. How do you think about insecurity as it relates to dignity? Because we all fall short of what we want to be, who's created us to be, what we are, right? How do you think about insecurity as it relates to dignity? Because that's something that we all struggle with and we're trying to, get better at.
Well, getting your dignity from things that can change is the source of insecurity. If you get your value from your performance, you're going to feel insecure because there's sometimes you're not going to perform well. And so if you get your value from how you compare, you may be the most successful man in the room until you go into a different room where you may be the least successful man in that room. And so you're always going to have this insecurity. You go between anxiety and fear. You're feeling, one day you're feeling superior, the next day you feel inferior. Us as men, when we feel insecure, we end up causing damage to the people around us. Most of our failures stem from this sense of insecurity. And we feel we have to be strong and have to be aggressive, have to do all these things. And when we feel we can't, we feel that it's somehow threatened, we become a danger to whatever we feel is threatening to us.
For me, I feel like I've ignored my insecurities. I don't address them and I let them stack up to the point where, when I do address it, it's like a volcano, and it just damages everything, like you said.
The way you overcome that is you completely detach your value from anything that can change. You get rid of the measuring stick that we have as men, and you simply embrace your value.
When you think about dignity, dignity is the foundation, though. Like that is the principle that we all have to hold within ourselves, and that shouldn't waver. Like our value of ourselves, our perception of ourselves shouldn't waver, whether we're successful or going through a tough time.
I think that value is not something that can be earned. That's a lie that we believe. That's an assumption that we have that somehow I can earn value, but you can't. Your value is something that you simply have to every day wake up every morning and embrace it. And so when you do, you're no longer insecure. It's almost like a balance. If you get your value from things that change, you're either up or down, right? Like a seesaw. But, and so the daily grind is to find a center, to be in the middle, to say my value is not conditioned upon any of these things. My value is unconditional. And when you do that, you don't feel insecure. You get off the seesaw.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the King Culture Podcast. Make sure to check us out at kingculture.org, where you can gain more information about what we do and stand for. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. The King Culture Podcast, where we are equipping men to become selfless leaders.